Extra, extra, read all about it. Nixon resigns. This was the headline on August 9th, 1974, as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of Nixon resigning as President of the United States. And I was only 12 years old. I had just turned 12 when this happened. And I remember I kind of felt sorry for Nixon at the time, but I didn't really know much about Watergate, except that it was interrupting all my favorite TV shows, all the news reports, and it just became a big scandal in 73 and 74. And eventually, once I became more investigative, I learned what happened with Watergate and why Nixon resigned. He was about to be impeached because he had lost support of Congress, and even people in his own party, in the Republican Party, had deserted him in Congress because of a smoking gun tape that came out that revealed Nixon had offered hush money to criminals to block a federal investigation into his criminal activities. And it all started with the Watergate break-in of the Democratic headquarters in 1972 at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C. And basically, it's not known whether or not Nixon ordered the break-in, but it was his men, his Gestapo, his team of plumbers who were hired by him to stop media leaks. And so their job was to bust into offices, organizations that might have had dirt on Nixon, you know, like Democratic headquarters. Why wouldn't they be collecting dirt on him during the 72 campaign? He kind of didn't have to do that because he ended up winning that election by a landslide. But a lot of that had to do with outspending his opponent by 2-to-1 in campaign ads. Plus, his campaign ran Democrats for Nixon ads put together by John Connally, who used to be a Democrat, then became a Republican who worked for Nixon as his Treasury Secretary. And Connally was the guy who took us off the gold standard under Nixon's direction, of course. So Connally was Nixon's right-hand man, just as he was LBJ's right-hand man. So he was a very pivotal character in American history. And Nixon wanted to pick Connally as his vice president when his corrupt vice president Spiro Agnew resigned in October 73, but Congress didn't want it because I guess he was too close to Nixon. So they wanted Ford, who had served on the Warren Commission and helped cover up the JFK assassination, and inevitably helped cover up Watergate, two biggest crimes of the century. He did it by pardoning Nixon, by giving him a blanket pardon for any crimes he may have committed as president while he was in the White House. So Nixon accepting that pardon, that's kind of like giving it away that he was guilty, just as his own tapes revealed that he was offering hush money to conspirators to block the investigation into crimes he committed during the White House. And one of those crimes was developing a slush fund, an illegal slush fund, like campaign fund, that he scooped up from corporations. Some of it was through coercion, like he threatened corporations if they didn't donate to his 72 campaign. Even his buddy at McDonald's, Ray Kroc, he extracted money from him for the campaign and did some favors for him to involving labor laws and how much like minimum wage, like he helped block the minimum wage boost to help McDonald's. So anyway, Nixon did all kinds of shady stuff that he tried to cover up, and it seems shady that he was taping all the White House phone calls, but Johnson and Kennedy had done that as well with their own recording systems, and Nixon had installed his own system. But it was the tapes that inevitably came back to haunt Nixon. which is why he had to resign. He proved on tape that he was corrupt, and so basically, if he didn't resign, he was going to get impeached by the Democratic Congress. And, you know, he just knew his only way out was for his hand-picked successor, Ford, to become president and then pardon him for all his crimes. And then Ford lost to unknown Carter in 1976, partly because of the pardon. So anyway, that's a reflection on history. And how does this relate to Sacramento history? This edition right here of the Sacramento Union is historic because, well, it's a defunct newspaper. It was the Republican paper at the time, the morning paper in Sacramento, whereas the Sacramento Bee in the 70s was the afternoon paper. Then after a truckers' strike, the Bee switched to mornings by the late 70s, but the Bee was always more popular than the Union. The only thing the Union had going for it, and it was a much thinner paper, was that it had color photography on it. So that's why I got this paper as a souvenir, because it had color photography on it, whereas the Bee was black and white, usually back in the 70s. And then they started injecting color into it, I think in the 80s. But here it is. Nixon Resigns, one of the biggest crimes of the century, Watergate. And that whole issue, Watergate, was reflected in a song at the time on the charts, and that was Sweet Home Alabama by Lynyrd Skynyrd. Stevie Wonder also had a song out at the time about Nixon. It was called You Haven't Done Nothin, and that went to #1 in November 1974. So that should do it for another Riverside Chat. Let's meet again here at the American River and talk more politics, history, and world affairs.